in the Word. We're going to
Yeah.
study the Word. We're going to get into the Word. You know, today, Dr. Hinnant, I want to really look at a couple of things from the Old Testament's perspective.
Right.
And I want us to look at it and using this is your book right here.
The Day of the Lord commentary. Yes.
Yes. So
Yes.
anybody wanting to get this book, it's definitely available. And it's a good book. And you will definitely get insight. And also, anybody that wants somebody that God has anointed to talk about eschatology, well, Dr. Hinnant is available. Um, I don't know. We'll put his email and everything, his information in the somewhere in here. We'll put it in there after we do this show. We can't do it at this moment, but we'll put that in there so that if you need to contact him and want him to speak, because we're at the end. There's a lot of things going on right now that's letting us know that our redemption draws nigh.
It does.
And
It
it
does.
does.
Yeah.
And what a time to be discussing the coming of the Lord.
Oh, yeah.
And so
Yeah.
tonight I want to start with because it's some things that I have always wrestled with when it comes to Ezekiel's war. Now we're looking at this what's going on right now with Iran. And you could elaborate on that, which how you see it playing out.
Mhm.
But from a textual biblical stance, when it comes to understanding the Ezekiel Gog and Magog war, where there's a coalition of mostly looks like um, Muslim nations. Could you kind of go over that with us and explain that so that people can
Well,
understand better?
well, yeah, and there's a lot of conjecture. First of all, what we want to point out to your viewers is that the single largest New Testament description of the final battle of Armageddon is Revelation 19, and we were into that in our last session. And the single largest Old Testament description of the Battle of Armageddon, which is really a war, the War of Armageddon, that description is in Ezekiel 38 and 39. And so there's a general misconception about that. And you just mentioned one of them, that it has to be an Arab or Muslim nation. And that's a misconception, because that's actually not stated in here. Now, there are Arab nations in the coalition, but the driving force is a nation from the north called Magog. And so that really describes a conflict that lasts 3.5 years. It begins at the midpoint of the tribulation and it continues to the end of the tribulation. The final act in that war is when Christ returns personally to end the 7-year tribulation period and the 3.5 years of the Great Tribulation. And he destroys Antichrist and his armies. It's a coalition of all the nations of the world at Armageddon in the valley of Megiddo, in the valley of Jezreel, which is just beneath the hill of Megiddo. Armageddon means the hill of Megiddo. So that ends a war, a conflict. It's not a simple battle, as some have envisioned. Another misconception is that Armageddon is a battle between the nations. It is not. It is not. There are several factors going on at the same time when the final battle of Armageddon comes, the terminating conflict that terminates the whole 7 years, because the armies of the east, the kings of the east, are described in Revelation 9. They are coming to the theater of the Middle East, because they all know, all nations will know by this time, that Christ is returning personally with armies of angels and saints. And so they will gather there literally to make war with God in the person of Christ and his armies. Now, that some people may say that's utter madness, but that's exactly what the Bible says, and it's very explicit about it. Revelation 17, what we talked about in our last session, verses 12 through 14, states explicitly that the 10 kings who support Antichrist make war with the Lamb, but that the Lamb overcomes them. And that's not talking about the midpoint. That's the end of that time. That's Armageddon. So I don't know which part you want us to start with, but Ezekiel 38 and 39 describes the whole process. You want us to get into that, or you want me to lead into that by what I think is going on now in Iran?
Yeah, I want you to start right now how
Okay.
everything's been set up. How even with our president, because so many people don't like him, they
Yeah.
detest him.
Yeah.
But the thing that what I always tell people is, we have things that we care about, and
Mhm.
God has things that He cares about.
Right.
The one thing that God cares about is souls.
Right. Right.
So,
Yeah.
and we care about gas prices, we care about jobs and stuff like that, but God is focused on eternal things.
Right.
So
Correct.
every move God makes is not going to sit well with human beings
Right.
because He's not looking at a certain group of human beings. He's looking at everybody. So
Correct.
He has to be just.
Yeah.
So people are crying all over the earth
Yes.
for relief, for help.
Yes. Yeah.
People, there are countries that have an iron curtain over them
Right.
for 47 years where no gospel really could get in there like it
Correct.
should.
Correct.
And
Now
the
that's
people were
right.
imprisoned.
Yeah. Correct.
So,
And
so
yeah.
when God makes moves, God makes moves based off of His wisdom, not what we want, not what we feel. We have our debates, but really, God is doing things in the earth realm according to His eternal purposes. I love how Paul always put it, that the purposes of God might be fulfilled. So it
Correct.
doesn't matter who's at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. We get hung up on that, but that doesn't even matter when God uses whoever He wants to use,
Correct.
when
He
He
can
wants to
use.
use, how He
Right.
wants to use.
Right.
And we shouldn't
Right.
be murmuring and complaining anyway, but we do because
Right.
we don't understand our Father's what He's doing. So
Yes. And this is
start right there.
okay. All right.
What's
Yeah.
happening right now, and lead the people into we don't know the timing. We know some things have got to happen.
Mhm.
That God is awakening His church. We're not gonna go out here feeble need. We are going to be a glorious church
Yes.
without spot or wrinkle. So
Right.
we know some things are going to happen.
Right.
But if you just go from there and just let us see how you see God has laid it out.
Okay. Yes, Joe. To your point there, what's going on now in the Middle East, I do believe, is a fulfillment of God's plan. Now, there's not a specific prophecy that says that Iran will be defeated in the last days, but the Bible does say that Israel will be in a condition of unprecedented peace when they are attacked from the north by Gog, who is the leader of Magog. Now, those are code terms, if you will. It's not a specific name. Now, we'll get into that in just a moment. But when Israel was reformed as a nation in 1948, from that point to the moment that we're speaking right now, they have never had sustained peace. They've never had complete security. They have been under attack by either the armies of the nations around them or by terrorists ever since. Now, the latest, and in each one of those conflicts, and I'll add that they were victorious because it was not the time for them to be defeated. So they have won those victories hands down. It was almost no contest. The only time that they were seriously threatened was, other than their original War of Independence, was in 1973 during the Yom Kippur conflict. They were almost overrun. And at that time, Golda Meir called Richard Nixon and asked him for help in the middle of the night. And he was going to put her off a day or two. And she said, Mr. Nixon, so the report goes, she said, Mr. Nixon, President Nixon, if you don't send help tonight, there'll be no Israel tomorrow. So he airlifted tanks and munitions and armored vehicles to Israel just in the nick of time, and they rolled back the invasion from, at that time, which was from Iraq and Syria. And so they almost were overthrown then. If that had happened, then it would have been a complete defeat of God's plan. So God did not let that happen. Now, so in Ezekiel 38 and 39, though, at the beginning of the conflict of that Gog has from the north, Gog from the nation of Magog, and again, these are code terms, with Israel. At that time, Israel's in a state of unprecedented peace. Now, think with me just a moment. Since 1948, May 1948, Israel has never had a period of sustained peace. They've always been under threat by either an Arab nation or one or more terrorist groups. Now, for the last 47 years, um, Iran has been sponsoring Hezbollah, the Houthis, and Hamas. They have been keeping them going, feeding them weapons, and there's been a steady cash flow to them. Now, what's happening now is that Iran's economy is being crushed, not because of the Iranian people, but because of the theocratic regime that is there. They are hardline Muslims, and they're fanatics. They really hope to destroy the world, to, in their thinking, make the way for their Messiah or great leader to come. They don't call him the Messiah, but they look to him as come as great leader. So in their minds, they would be happy to destroy the world if they could. So what's happening now is because they were very close to having an active nuclear weapon. They were at 80% weapons grade production, and 60%. If to go up to weapons grade would only take 2 weeks. We had that information from them about a month ago. Their representative told our country. So that's why Trump has moved to finish their military forces off, and also to put an economic stranglehold on them over the Strait of Hormuz, so that their shipping cannot go out, come in, which means they cannot conduct business. Now, and so when this is over, I believe that that regime will have fallen, and the Iranian people will be in some better condition. They will have some government that is not a fanatical Islamic theocratic regime. Now, do bear in mind, for your listeners, they have killed tens of thousands of their own people, and they've killed many Americans through their terrorist proxies. So God has let this go on for 47 years, and your viewers need to know that God is very patient and forbearing in his processes, but divine judgment always comes. And sometimes God is so long and so forbearing, we think he doesn't care. He cares intensely. And so Iran has been threatening the Jewish people, and they've also been harassing their own people, oppressing them terribly, and they've been harassing Christians in their own country. For those who do not know it, Christ has been appearing in dreams to Muslims for several decades in an alarming an increase of occurrences. And so that's because the Muslim people believe that dreams have special means of communication from Allah, they believe. And so he's been appearing, and they've been understanding this is Jesus, and they've been converting. How many? We don't know exactly, but a large number. There are many house churches in Iran. All the sources that keep track of this will bear me out on that. So these people now are under horrible oppression because they're not free to confess their faith. They're not free to share the gospel on the streets, or they'll be killed. So one thing God is doing is freeing them. The other thing is he's freeing the Iranian people who are not fanatical Muslims and just want to live a normal life. And he's freeing them from this regime, which will hang them on the streets. I mean, it's a very brutal regime. And as you know, they've sponsored the other fanatical groups, which not long ago were putting videos on YouTube for slicing people's heads off. So God is bringing judgment against them. Now, if this continues and goes through, and I believe it will, the result will be that Israel will have sustained peace for the first time since 1948. And you might think, well, so what? Well, here's why that's important. In Ezekiel 38, at the time Israel is attacked at the midpoint of the tribulation period, they will have had an agreement, a peace treaty, a mutual non-aggression pact of some kind with a Western leader. The treaty will last 7 years. We're told about that in Daniel 9:27. And in the middle of that time, this Western leader, who heads a very, in fact, the world's foremost military power, will attack them. And when he attacks them, Ezekiel foresees that they are in a time of great peace. Now, if you've got your Bibles open, we can look to Ezekiel 38, and the Lord begins here in verse 8, after many days thou shalt be visited. In the latter years thou shalt come into the land that is brought back from the sword. Now, God is addressing Gog, the leader of Magog. Again, these are code words. He is from the far north. And if you get out your map and look directly north from Tel Aviv, you will see Moscow. I don't have the figures in front of me. I think it's 1,700 miles, Moscow. So he's speaking to Gog. After many days, you will be visited. In the latter years, you shall come into the land that is brought back from the sword. That is when God's people have been brought back to the land. Now, the regathering of Jews to the land, modern Zionism, began in the mid-1800s and lasted to the mid-1900s, mid-20th century. So for a whole period of 100 years, the Zionist movement was moving, and Jews were coming from Russia, from America, from different parts of the world back to the Holy Land. Now, so he says, and will be gathered out of many peoples against the mountains of Israel, which have been always waste. But it is brought forth out of the nations. They shall dwell safely, all of them. So God says, God, you're going to come against my people in a day. My people have been brought back from the nations, and they're dwelling safely, all of them, that all in the land. Thou shalt ascend and come like a storm, okay, like a sudden thunderstorm. Thou shalt be like a cloud to cover the land. I'm reading verse 9 now. Thou and all thy hordes and many peoples with thee. Now, and he has named those nations down here in verse 5, Persia, which is Iran, Cush, which is in Africa, and Put and Gomer and Togarmah. So now those are parts of Ethiopia, Libya, also Turkey and Armenia. So they will be confederate with Antichrist in this attack. But note, they dwell safely at this time. And he says, you will come like a storm and cover the land. This describes an overwhelming military victory. Most expositors believe it will be a blitzkrieg type victory. Now, we've just seen recently how air power alone can overwhelm a nation. And so his probably air power combined with missile strikes and then with infiltration by armored divisions with infantry will overwhelm the land of Israel. Now, do pay attention to this. Israel has never suffered defeat since 1948. Now, think about that. Never. And so you might wonder, well, so what? Because for all these years, some 75 plus years, every time they had a conflict, all odds were against them, particularly at the first. In 1948, when the Jews declared independence in May 14th, 1948, they declared them at noon in Tel Aviv. That night, bombs fell. 5 and eventually 7 Arab nations with British-trained mechanized armies attacked them from all sides. Egypt from the south, Syria from the north, Lebanon, and eventually Jordan got in on it, Iraq. All of these countries attacked Israel. They should have gone down the first day, but they didn't. All they had on their side, they had machine guns, and their army was called the Haganah, and they had been a defense force of a type before that time. But they had no planes. The planes were on order from Czechoslovakia. America didn't give them any arms at all, nothing. In fact, if an American citizen went and fought for Israel, they would either lose their citizenship or be imprisoned, I think both. So all the odds were against Israel, but they survived that initial onslaught of the first couple of weeks. Then there was a truce called by the UN, and during that truce, the Israelis really regrouped, and they organized much better than the Arab nations, and they went on the offensive. Long story short, that first war lasted about a year, and at the end of that time, the Israelis had established their presence in the homeland, which was given to them, now listen carefully, by the UN. They didn't steal it from anybody. Another fact your viewers probably need to know is this, that while Israel is an enemy of the gospel, they're beloved of God because of the covenant that he made with them with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and because his prophets see them being restored in the last days. So God is for Israel. That doesn't mean that every decision they make is correct. Okay. That's never been true of any nation. Even in the Old Testament, the Jewish kings made mistakes, some of them terrible, but God was for them.
Dr. Hinnant,
Yes.
could you explain when you said they're enemy of the gospel? Because somebody might want to know what do you mean by that?
Yes, because they reject Christ. They do not accept that Yeshua, Jesus of Nazareth, was and is their Messiah. So for that reason, they're against the good news of salvation through Christ alone. And they are still looking for their Messiah. Well, he's coming back, but his name's going to be Jesus. So they're in error on that, serious, deadly error. A Jew who rejects Jesus will go to hell just like a Gentile. But God has said in his prophets that he would turn their hearts back in the last days. So this has been the case with them, and God has preserved them in the land against all odds during many different wars. 1955, I think there was one in the early 60s, and there was one in 1967, which they won overwhelmingly. The Yom Kippur War, 1973, there were wars and conflicts in the early 80s with the PLO, and it's just been on and on and on all through the years. They've never had sustained peace. We can't understand that here in America. We have two large oceans on either side. Nobody's shooting rockets at us. Nobody's threatening us. So we can't quite identify with that. Now, so at this text, though, Ezekiel 38, he says clearly that Israel will be overwhelmed. So this will be an unprecedented event for modern Israel. He goes on to say in verse 10, thus saith the Lord God, it shall also come to pass that at the same time shall things come into thy mind. Now God is speaking to Gog, Antichrist, the beast. He's saying you're going to have some thoughts. And thou shalt think an evil thought. Okay, now listen to this. And thou shalt say, I will go up to the land of unwalled villages. Israel will be so peaceful, so secure, they won't even have, now again, this is using ancient language to describe a modern condition. In ancient times, a city that was unwalled was, first of all, very large. And secondly, they were so powerful of a nation, they could raise a mighty army very quickly, that they didn't feel the need to have walls. So in modern terms, that would be a nation that was very secure. Why? And here's why. Because at the first of the tribulation, Antichrist makes a peace treaty. Antichrist will be the strongest military leader in the world at that time. And he makes a peace treaty with Israel. Now, he has no intention of keeping it, but he makes it to hold off Israel while he aggresses the other nations in the world. He's rising to world power during the first 3.5 years. World War III will be caused by him. So during that time, Israel, ironically, will be in peace. Now think for a moment. For all these years since their existence, they have a constant conflict, but most of the other nations have been at peace. Now it will be reversed. Israel will have peace because Antichrist has promised to defend them, which he does for the first 3.5 years. And all the other nations will be at war because he's aggressing them. He wants to have world power, which he eventually will have. So he says, you're going to have an evil thought, Gog, and you're going to say, I'm going to go up against the land of unwalled villages. Speaking of Israel, I will go to those who are at rest, who dwell safely, all of them dwelling without walls and having neither bars nor gates. That is, they don't worry about defense. Why? Because Antichrist has got this agreement with them. And they know that if anybody attacks them, he's going to overwhelm them. And he says, you're going to have an evil thought, though, to go up against the very land you have peace with. And he says, to take a spoil and to take a prey. Now, what is he talking about? He wants to rob Israel. And you might think, some people may not realize how prosperous a nation Israel is. Tel Aviv is a very cosmopolitan city. They're a center of technology. They're a center of agricultural technology as well. Israel it has leading scientists, inventors, and engineers in many different fields. They're extremely gifted people, and their economy is very strong, particularly for a nation that only has about 10 million people right now. So he says, you're coming to take a spoil and to take a prey. Now, this has twofold meanings. He wants to rob them, but he also wants to enslave them. And some people say, wait a minute, slavery hadn't happened for hundreds of years. I'll say, well, hold on a minute. Human bondage is happening right now while we speak as never before in the history of the world. Young girls are being caught in different parts of the world, taken into sex slavery. Now, Antichrist will undoubtedly do that, but it'll also do other things like putting them to forced labor. We saw Hitler do that in the Second World War. And of course, that's been done from the beginning of time. So that's his intent, to take them, to spoil them, and also to take them as a prey, to turn thine hand upon the desolate places that are now inhabited and upon the people that are gathered out of the nations. He's repeating that this nation has been regathered from dispersion. And again, that's exactly what happened with Israel when it was reformed in the mid-20th centuries. And to dwell in the midst of the land, Sheba and Dedan and the merchants of Tarshish with all its young lions shall say to you, are you come to take a spoil? Now here he's saying all the major merchandisers and tradesmen of the world will say to you, Gog or Antichrist, have you come down to take a spoil? Have you come down to rob Israel? Have you gathered your company to take a prey? Again, that's a reference to taking people as human bondage, to carry away silver and gold, to take away cattle and goods, to take a great spoil. So he's very clearly saying that Israel will be wealthy, peaceful, and deeply secure. Now he goes on to say this, therefore, son of man, prophesy and say unto Gog. So he says, Ezekiel, send this prophecy to Gog. Thus saith the Lord God, in that day, when my people of Israel dwell safely, shalt thou not know it? He said, don't you know that they're safe? Of course he'll know, because he's the one who's given them the peace treaty. And thou shalt come from thou shalt come from thy place out of the north parts. Again, Moscow's directly north of Tel Aviv. Thou and many peoples with thee. That's the coalition that comes with him. I just read those names to you earlier. Thou and many peoples with thee, all of them riding upon horses, a great company and a mighty army. Now, why does he say upon horses? Because God could not describe modern warfare with modern terms to an ancient people. So he's using ancient terminology to describe the equivalent in modern military personnel and equipment. And thou shalt come from that place out of the north parts. Yeah, we've read this. All right. And thou shalt come against my people of Israel like a cloud to cover the land. That's the second time he said, cover the land like a cloud. The previous statement was in verses 8 and 9, verse 9 specifically. So he said twice that he will overwhelm the nation of Israel. And he goes on to say, it shall be in the latter days. Now, this is important because in prophecies, when the term latter days is given, we know we're dealing with an end time prophecy. So there's no question. This was not something fulfilled in the exile or the post-exile period. In the latter days, and I will bring thee against my land. So God is saying, I'm going to bring you. Now, that's interesting. Why would God say he is bringing God? Because he's permitting him to come. He's permitting him to come. In other words, God is hooking him like a fish and drawing him in to his own destruction. But first, he gains an amazing victory. Why does God do this? Two reasons. First, to test the faith of the righteous Jewish Jesus believers. He lets their enemies have the victory. And it looks like God is powerless, but he's only allowing it. The second reason he does it is to increase the pride of the beast, Antichrist, who's called Gog here. Increase his pride. He thinks he's got the victory. And then suddenly he's going to be overthrown. So let's read about that. So he says, I'm going to bring you against my land so that the nations may know when I shall be sanctified in you, O Gog, before their eyes. He's saying, look, I'm going to let you come against Israel and defeat them. So when I overthrow you later, all the nations know I'm a sovereign God and I can do what I will. Thus saith the Lord God, art thou he of whom I have spoken of old by my servants, the prophets of Israel, who prophesied in those days many years that I would bring thee against them? Now he's referring to the fact that other prophets have referred to this battle. You say, what prophets? Well, first, one that comes to mind very quickly is Joel chapter 3. Joel chapter 3 is a very clear, explicit prophecy of many nations coming against Israel. So he goes on to say, and it shall come to pass, this is verse 18, at the same time when Gog shall come against the land of Israel. Now get this, when Gog shall come against the land of Israel. So we know this land of unwalled cities, this land that's peaceful, this land that's prosperous, this land where captives have been returned from a dispersion period is